The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and polished wood, too big for a 6-year-old's trembling heart. Outside, palms drifted in the late October breeze. Inside, Lisa Marie Presley perched on a stiff vinyl chair, knees pressed together, rubber-soled shoes dangling. Beside her, Miss Jenkins smoothed the girl's pale pink cardigan. When the nurse finally opened the door, face set in practiced kindness, Lisa Marie felt a spark of hope. But as soon as she whispered, "My tummy hurts," and stammered, "My daddy is Elvis Presley," the nurse's professional mask cracked into a cold, mocking smile. That single, gentle scoff echoed like a slap, shrinking Lisa Marie's world to the narrow confines of the exam table, where innocence met humiliation, and a little girl discovered that fame's shadow could cut deeper than any spotlight. Let us know where you're watching from, and we hope you enjoy the story. The crisp air of early autumn filtered through the narrow window slats in room 12 of Crestwood Academy, turning dust motes into tiny dancers in the pale, flickering glow of a single overhead fluorescent tube. 6-year-old Lisa Marie Presley sat on the narrow examination table, her small frame dwarfed by the paper-covered cushion. The crisp exam gown rustled around her knees. She clutched the table's edge, fingernails whitening with each breath. Across from her, Nurse Thompson, arms folded, posture rigid, studied a clipboard. The stale scent of antiseptic clung to her starched uniform, her lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her, the wall bulletin boasted annual vision screening and a cartoon heart urging children to stay healthy. The contrast stung. A young girl in the poster grinned under rainbow eyes. Lisa's own heart pounded beneath her ribs. "Tell me again," the nurse said, voice tired and cool. "Where does it hurt?" Lisa swallowed. The pain in her stomach throbbed like the hum of the fluorescent tube, insistent and dull at once. "Right here," she whispered, placing a tentative hand on her belly. The nurse made a disapproving note. "Have you been eating properly? Getting fresh air? How often do you see your doctor?" Lisa's throat tightened. She parted her lips. "Well, Mommy says I'm fine, but sometimes I feel—" "Have you been vaccinated? Your records show gaps." The nurse's ink hovered over blank lines. Then she pinned her gaze on Lisa. "And who is your father?" The question fell with the weight of a hammer. Lisa's pulse thundered as she answered, voice barely more than a breath. "My daddy is Elvis Presley." Silence stretched, taut as a drawn bow. Then the nurse's pen dropped onto the clipboard with a dull thud. Her stoic mask cracked into a mocking smile. "Oh, sure, darling. And I'm Queen Victoria." She allowed a soft chuckle, one that carried enough sharpness to split the quiet. Lisa's stomach clenched. She shrank into herself, gaze darting to the corner where another child, a boy in a sailor suit, peeked from behind his mother. His lips twitched, uncertain, then the sound slipped free. A giggle was followed by the snicker of two girls in white uniforms behind the nurse's desk. Their laughter rippled, a cold current that crept around Lisa's ankles, chilling her. She blinked hard, teeth clenched. Her hands twisted the gown's fabric into tight knots. Her eyes flicked from the mocking nurse to the cartoon heart on the wall. Bright, uncomplicated. She wanted to disappear into that painted smile. The nurse's chuckle subsided into a gentle sigh of condescension. "Well, Miss Presley," she said, checking her long nails, "let's try not to make up stories, shall we? I'll give you some antacid. Maybe you're just nervous." She tore off a paper cup, filled it from a dispenser, and handed it to Lisa with a patronizing tilt. Lisa took it, fingers trembling around the rim, and sipped the chalky liquid as though it might erase her shame. As the nurse scribbled anxiety under diagnosis, Lisa stared at the pale ceiling tiles. She tasted metal on her tongue, and behind her eyelids, tears pooled. Each blink was a battle to hold them back. She felt small, her crown of curls suddenly too heavy, her teddy bear pajamas more absurd than comforting. The door clicked, and in rushed Ms. Jenkins, the kind-hearted nanny who cared for Lisa during her parents' busy schedules. The nanny's eyes found Lisa's at once, wide and gleaming with hurt. She laid a gentle hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she asked, voice soft as cotton. Lisa turned, chest tight with the need to vanish. She shook her head. The paper gown crinkled beneath her. She laughed at me," she whispered, voice shaking. Ms. Jenkins's lips tightened. She shot a hard glance at Nurse Thompson, who offered a thin, practiced smile and folded her arms. "You must excuse me," the nurse said, voice saccharine. "I have another patient." Ms. Jenkins guided Lisa off the table, arms wrapped protectively around the little girl. As they stepped into the hallway, Lisa pressed her face against the nanny's coat, tears finally slipping free. The fluorescent glow faded behind them, chased away by the warmth of Ms. Jenkins's embrace. In the hush of the corridor, beyond the walls where laughter once seemed safe, Lisa Marie Presley realized that being the daughter of Elvis Presley sometimes meant carrying a burden no child should bear, a burden of expectations, of spotlight, and of words that cut deeper than any spotlight's glare. And as Ms. Jenkins led her down the linoleum hall, Lisa pressed her small fist to her chest, where the steady beat of her heart reminded her that even in the face of scorn, her identity was hers alone. Fragile, but unbroken. The drive from Beverly Hills back to Graceland East felt impossibly long for young Lisa Marie Presley, though it was barely 20 minutes in the black Cadillac Coupe de Ville. In the back seat, she pressed her knees together, clutching her school bag as though it were a life raft. The streetlights passed in soft orange pools on the windshield, their halos melting into the night. Beside her, Ms. Jenkins sat forward, one hand resting on the back of the seat, watching the child's profile in the dim light. When the car pulled into the circular drive, the sprawling white mansion rose against the starless sky, windows dark in solidarity with Lisa's own mood. Ms. Jenkins helped her from the car, folding the seatbelt with practiced ease. Lisa's boots clicked on the marble floor of the portico as she followed Ms. Jenkins inside, each step echoing down the grand corridor. A portrait of Elvis's mother, Gladys, hung at the hall's center, her calm, maternal eyes watching over them both. Lisa paused before the painting, gaze lingering on the gentle smile. She wondered if her grandmother had ever felt this small, this knocked off balance when someone laughed at her child. She swallowed hard, glancing at the ornate parlor beyond where a fire smoldered low, casting dancing shadows on the Persian rug. Elvis's low voice drifted toward them from the library. She glanced at Ms. Jenkins, who offered a reassuring nod. The nanny grasped Lisa's hand and guided her down the corridor. The muffled strains of a distant piano floated through the walls, a private rehearsal or perhaps a silent reflection. Tonight, the notes sounded melancholy. Elvis looked up from behind an open volume of sheet music when they entered the library. His suit jacket lay draped over a chair, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He closed the book gently, stood, and crossed to them. His normally meticulous hair was swept back, but a few strands had loosened, giving him an air of fatigue edged with concern. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said softly, using the nickname he reserved for her alone. His voice was low, carrying the weight of a man who had traveled miles too many and seen nights too long. "How you feeling, kiddo?" Lisa's eyes flicked to Ms. Jenkins, then down at the rug. She shook her head, voice trembling. I don't want to talk about it." Her small shoulders rose and fell. Elvis crouched until he was eye level with her. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart," he said, "whatever happened today, you can tell me. You know you can." She nibbled her lower lip, eyes moist. He tightened his hand. "Tell me about the nurse." Her breath hitched. She laughed. "When I said you were my daddy." She lifted her chin, voice barely audible. "She said I was making it up." She blinked back tears. "And all the other kids, they heard." Elvis closed his eyes, his jaw flexing. He drew a slow breath and released it in a sigh that seemed to carry away his anger. He swallowed hard, then placed both hands on her shoulders. "That wasn't right." His tone was calm but fierce, like a storm held in reserve. "Nobody has the right to make you feel small. Ever." Lisa met his eyes. For a flicker of a heartbeat, hope and fear battled in her gaze. She bit her lip again. He reached into his pocket, withdrew a small velvet box, and set it gently on the table where the lamplight fell. Lisa's eyes widened. "Dad?" He smiled, sorrow and love mingling in the crease of his eyes. "I want you to have this." He opened the box to reveal the tiny gold ring, the band thin and shining with her grandmother's engraving inside. "It's mine. But, more importantly, it's yours, too. A reminder that you belong to a family that protects you." She reached out with trembling fingers, sliding the ring onto her own little finger. It was loose. He took her hand and adjusted it until it fit snugly. She looked up at him, tears finally breaking free, and nodded once, hard. Elvis swept her into an embrace, careful not to jostle her new treasure. She buried her face in his chest, arms flung wide, and he buried his face in her hair, breathing in the soft scent of her shampoo. He held her longer than he had held anyone in years, offering her the refuge she needed. When they finally separated, he brushed away a tear from her cheek. "Tomorrow," he said gently, "we're going back there together. And you tell her, if she laughs again, you tell Nurse Thompson that you're Elvis Presley's daughter, and I'll be the one to straighten her out." Lisa's lips curved into a tiny, hopeful smile. "Promise?" He nodded and kissed her forehead. "I promise." Ms. Jenkins, who had been quietly watching, exhaled. "Thank you, Mr. Presley," she murmured, voice thick with relief. Elvis offered her a grateful nod, then turned to Lisa. "Let's get you to bed, Pumpkin. Tomorrow's a new day." Lisa allowed herself a full, genuine grin, a rare bloom of joy in a night of shadows. Together, they left the library, the ring catching the lamplight like a beacon of belonging. And as the door closed behind them, the grandeur of Graceland felt less like a gilded cage and more like a home that would always protect its little princess. The following morning, the sun had barely climbed above the horizon when Elvis Presley stepped from the Cadillac into the manicured courtyard of Crestwood Academy. He wore a midnight blue overcoat that swallowed his frame, and dark aviator sunglasses despite the soft light. His tie was loosened, top button undone, a single gold cufflink glinting at his wrist. A subtle nod to those who knew him best. In his hand, he carried only a simple leather satchel. Staff members on duty, accustomed to expecting only children and nannies, froze as Elvis slipped past the wrought iron gates. He moved with a calm certainty, the gravel whispering under polished loafers. Teachers on morning patrol paused mid-conversation, eyes widening. The school secretary at her desk looked up, blinking twice, certain she'd mistaken him for someone else. A hush fell over the foyer like a held breath. Elvis walked to the administrative wing and pushed open the door marked Faculty Only. The corridor beyond was dim, the walls lined with framed portraits of honor students and mottled poker chip plaques proclaiming Excellence in Character. Elvis paused at a water cooler, his reflection in the stainless steel prompting a faint nod. He filled a paper cup, then approached a teacher finishing his coffee. "Can you tell me where the nurse's office is?" Elvis asked, voice low and steady, as if requesting directions from a stranger. He kept his gaze polite, neutral. The teacher stared at him, jaw slack. Second floor, room 12, the man stammered, nearly dropping his cup. "Take the stairs, down the hall, first door on the left." Elvis thanked him with a tilt of his head and proceeded, each step measured. In the stairwell, the carpet muffled his footsteps. The banister gleamed under soft, overhead lights. At the second-floor landing, he paused at an open door, the principal's office. He dropped his satchel on the floor with a soft thud, then gently closed the door behind him and leaned in. The principal, Mr. Caldwell, looked up from a ledger. His gray suit was impeccably pressed. His tie, striped in school colors, was knotted perfectly. He blinked in surprise. "Mr. Presley," he stuttered, sliding to his feet. "I didn't expect—" Elvis held up a finger. "Just show me the way, please." He set down his satchel and let his coat fall away, revealing a simple white shirt. "I prefer to be addressed informally. Please." He offered a gentle, disarming smile that seemed to smooth the principal's creases. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat, swallowed. "Right this way. Nurse's office, down the hall, through 2 doors, then a left." Elvis nodded and collected his satchel. "Thank you." He locked eyes with the principal. "Your staff would do well to remember that every child here deserves respect." Mr. Caldwell's lips quivered. Yes, sir." Elvis moved on, polite and unhurried, leaving a silence behind him as thick as velvet. In the corridor mosaic of linoleum tiles, the janitor paused, mop in hand, watching the retreating figure. Teachers peered from classroom doors, exchanging whispers. "Is that? No, it can't be. He's here for his daughter." At the end of the hall, a pair of double doors bore a small brass plaque. Nurse Thompson's office. Elvis rapped lightly, 3 slow, deliberate taps. Inside, Nurse Thompson sat at her desk, spectacles perched precariously on her nose, fingernails clicking on a clipboard. When she lifted her gaze, recognition bloomed in her eyes, then tightened into startled dismay. "Elvis Presley," she murmured, rising hastily as color drained from her cheeks. The bright fluorescent light overhead flickered, catching her as though in a spotlight. No one had summoned her, or so she thought. Elvis entered, closing the door behind him. He leaned against the door frame, hands folded. The satchel rested on the floor at his feet. The sterile scent of white coats and rubbing alcohol filled the air. 2 children's height stickers on the wall beside the sink marked yearly progress. One sticker sat just below his daughter's name, now too tall for the office. Nurse Thompson swallowed, voice quivering. "Mr. Presley, I didn't know you would come." Elvis inclined his head. "I didn't come here to make a scene." His tone was calm as an autumn evening. "I came because yesterday, when my daughter told you who she was, you laughed." A tremor of shame passed through her. She pressed her knuckles to her lips. I apologize. I didn't mean—" He interrupted softly, but firmly. "When a little girl speaks the truth, it's not a joke. Even if she wasn't my daughter, you should have listened." His gaze held her, unwavering. Behind her spectacles, her eyes glistened with regret. Nurse Thompson lowered her head. "I was ignorant. I'm sorry." Elvis stepped forward, unfolding his arms. You work here. You're entrusted with caring for children. You have to do better." He retrieved a single sheet of paper from his satchel, a typed note that read, "Every child deserves to be heard." Below was his printed name and signature. "This goes in your records," he said, placing the paper gently on her desk. "Not as punishment, but as a reminder." He leveled his gaze. "Do not let it happen again." Tears welled in her eyes. "I understand." The tension between them faded as Elvis tucked back his note and straightened. His height loomed, but there was no menace in his stance, only solemn authority. He turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. "I hope you mean it," he said quietly, voice echoing off the linoleum. As he stepped back into the corridor, the hush fell into waves behind him. Mr. Caldwell emerged from his office, shoulders slumped, and the janitor resumed mopping, head bowed. Teachers slipped back to their classrooms, whispers swirling of how kindness and respect can come with the softest words or the simplest acts. In the empty office, Nurse Thompson pressed the note to her chest, tears slipping freely at last. Down the hall, Elvis picked up his satchel from the floor. His reflection gleamed in the window pane, tall, dignified, but not imperious. He adjusted his sunglasses, the world's weight settling on his shoulders with the ease of a man who has carried more burdens in silence than most do in a lifetime. He paused at the stairwell and looked back once, smile gentle. "Listen," he murmured to the empty hallway. "Always listen." Then he descended toward the entryway, leaving behind footsteps that would echo long after he was gone. Footsteps of grace, conviction, and unwavering love. The following morning, word of Elvis Presley's unannounced appearance at Crestwood Academy rippled swiftly beyond the ivy-clad walls and into the morning papers. By dawn's light, tabloids and broadsheets alike bore the headline, "King of Rock Interrupts School Health Check." A flurry of subheadings second-guessing why the world's most famous entertainer had stormed a children's nurse's office. Newspapers speculated on everything from Presley's erratic behavior to lurid rumors of a rift with his daughter, all while the printer's ink was still wet. Inside Graceland East, the mood was careful and hushed. Lisa Marie Presley awoke with sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains, casting pale stripes across her bedroom. She emerged in footed pajamas to find her father in the breakfast nook, pages of various papers spread before him. His brow was furrowed, but his green eyes softened at the sight of her. "Morning, Pumpkin," Elvis said, voice gentle. He slid a newspaper across the table. The headline stared up at her in fat, bold letters. Beside it lay a smaller clipping, an earnest editorial tucked inside the school newsletter. "Every child deserves to be heard." Lisa hesitated, fingertips brushing the print, feeling the morning's warmth seep into the room. She sat at the table, weaving her small hand into his. He squeezed it. A silent question. She nodded, voice brave. "They said you made Nurse Thompson cry." Elvis swallowed. "I said she needed to listen." He ruffled her hair. "And I meant every word." She gazed at him, a child's awe coiled in her expression. I'm sorry you had to do that." He covered her hand with both of his. "I would do it again, for you." In the days that followed, the phone at Graceland rang incessantly. Frantic calls from Colonel Parker demanding damage control, overtures from publicists eager for an exclusive angle, concerned letters from fan clubs split between praise for his protective fatherhood and carpings that he'd sully his image by confronting a school nurse. Yet Elvis stayed silent before the cameras, issuing no formal statement, allowing the truth to stand undisseminated in that simple bulletin note he had placed in Nurse Thompson's file. At Crestwood Academy, Nurse Thompson's days resumed under a pall of whispered apology. She found the note on her desk one morning, Elvis's measured reminder, "Every child deserves to be heard." She folded it into her fiches, drawing strength from the knowledge that the Queen of Rock's daughter had finally found her voice. Soon, relieved staffers noticed her softer approach, her genuine concern replacing the old veneer of aloof authority. That Christmas, a special assembly was called in the school's auditorium. The headmistress, voice quavering, presented a framed copy of Elvis's bulletin note to the student council, acknowledging that mistakes were made and that a father's fierce love had set something right for all the children who walked those halls. A hush fell, and for a moment the grandeur of Crestwood stilled, replaced by the simple lesson that every child's truth merits respect. 10 years later, long after the glare of flashbulbs had dimmed in Graceland's corridors, Lisa Marie Presley, now a poised teenager, found herself back in Crestwood's auditorium for a commemorative ceremony. She sat in the front row next to Ms. Jenkins, who still carried a soft reverence in her eyes for the events of that autumn so long ago. The headmistress, dignified and gray-haired, invited a young journalist to read from a recently published memoir, Elvis Presley Remembered, by the governess who had witnessed the fallout firsthand. As the passage was read aloud, describing how a school nurse once mocked a child's lineage, and how a supremely famous father had intervened not with anger, but with unwavering dignity, Lisa felt her throat tighten. The auditorium lights blazed overhead, illuminating the rows of students and faculty gathered to honor a quiet revolution of respect. A revolution ignited by the son of a Tennessee carpenter and the daughter who dared to say, "My daddy is Elvis Presley." When the reading ended, Lisa rose. The applause was immediate, but she lifted a hand, calling for silence. She stepped forward to the podium, her voice clear, measured, yet threaded with emotion. "I was 6 when that happened," she began, and the audience leaned in. "I was scared and shameful, and for a moment I thought I was wrong to be proud of who my father is. But he taught me something more important than any song or spotlight, that every voice matters. My father didn't need to be the king of rock to show that truth. He just needed to be a father." She paused, glancing toward the back row where a solitary portrait of Elvis's mother, Gladys, hung, a silent witness to the legacy of compassion woven through their family's history. Then she placed a hand over her heart. "Today," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I laugh a little easier, because I know to be heard is to be seen. And that sight, it changes everything." The auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. Sheets of music trembled in the hands of the choir. Reflections danced on lenses, and rose petals drifted from overhead nets. Yet at its heart, the moment was pure and simple. A daughter, once hurt by a careless laugh, now healed by her father's steadfast love. And in that loving silence, everyone, students, teachers, and guests, felt a deeper truth echo in their chests: that respect, once given, can resonate across generations. As the dais emptied and Lisa stepped back into the embrace of Ms. Jenkins, her eyes glistened. The lesson had come full circle, from a narrow clinical office to a broad stage of shared humanity. And for two people bound by blood and boundless love, the story would live on. Not in headlines, but in every child's heart who dared speak, and every ear that learned to listen.